Good morning. This is Bill from Curious Cars on an incredibly muggy and shitty Florida February morning. The hot weather is back. The muggy weather is back. It rained last night. I'm fogged up. You know, it's early February. It should be chilly out. I should be in a light jacket, and instead here I am fighting, condensation on my damn glasses. It is, thank you, Florida, again, for screwing my entire joy during these few supposed to be lovely winter months. And, here I am just moist and miserable and unhappy. And, what the hell am I going to do? So it heated up again. I mean, it's probably perfection for the winter people who come down here, the winter residents. They're not coming down to be cold. They're not coming down to be chilly. This is the weather they probably like. The difference is that they get to leave in April just before Satan's own climate takes effect, ruining the lives of everyone remaining for the next 7 months. And that is why I'm going to get the hell out of town starting this year. That is a vow. That is going to happen. Animals have been at a minimum. Last week I did a video and Peter unleashed a couple of dogs. One of them was foaming at the mouth like Cujo. It was terrifying. But he seemed old and, I was able to escape without any problems. But, I think Peter did that on purpose. I think he released the hounds just because it amused him. You can't tell me the things live outside. There's supposed to be some deer living outside around here, and I know the ones in this neck of the woods are carnivorous, so keeping a strong eye out for them, but I haven't seen them. I've also left the gate open in case they, come up front. Maybe they can escape. So if we see those, it may have to interrupt the video. But anyway, there it is. Birds, they really haven't been doing much to me lately. I don't know what's going on, if they're grouping up for a re-attack or, what the plan is. But I haven't been hassled by too many birds, so thank the Lord for small favors. And look, let's just dive into that. Well, okay, for a couple quick bits of news. I'm ashamed to report that Robert the German is winning. Now the whole shop is an absolute pigsty. It started with his area. I'm kind of neat by nature. I try to be a bit fastidious and, keep everything in its place. But, Robert is the precise opposite. He's the worst German ever. I have never seen so much piggery from one person, tools scattered around the place, parts scattered around the place, old drink containers, half-eaten sandwiches. It's disgusting. And now he's winning. The whole shop is a pigsty, and there's barely a tool in its designated spot. I'm spending more time looking for stuff than I am working on stuff, so that's going to end today. I'm going back to the shop, and we're going to put the hammer down, get everything back in its place, and start trying to live properly. So I just the worst friggin' German I've ever met. Unbelievable. And what else? Well, look, we'll get into the car. A while back, my ding guy, great guy, Canadian, and we won't hold that against him. He called and he asked if I wanted to buy his car. And before he even finished talking, I was spitting out the word no. Look, I'm trying to liquidate. I'm trying to get rid of things that I have, not add to the collection in the middle of that. So very much on a buying moratorium. And then he said, look, it's a 79 Formula Firebird. I mean, this is literally like the only car I would have bought, or maybe one of like three. I mean, he had to name a 79 Formula Firebird. It is the first car I ever owned. When I was 15 years old, I ended up with a 79 Formula Firebird, which obviously, as a result, is going to have a near and dear place in my heart for eternity. So when he said he had that, I mean, look, I drove over that night and he made me an owner. He knew I was an absolute sucker. He could have named Eddie Price. He named a good one, thank God, but I ended up buying the car, and here it is right now. And I've owned it for a few months, and I've come to the realization that as much as I might like to have a very small collection of cars, I'm a terrible steward for them. I have spotty indoor storage at best. I have to move things in and out of it all the time. Stuff gets left outdoors. You can't do that in Naples. Any car outdoors here just gets destroyed. So I'm just a terrible steward for a collector car, and I've decided to sell it. You know, I'm going to move. I've had the same torture with that LSC. The difference is that I actually planned on trying to keep this one. This was a plan, but it's failed. And now at the end of this week, actually, on Friday, it's going to run, I think Saturday, actually, it's going to run through the Carlisle Lakeland auction in Lakeland at the Sun and Fun up there, where I'm heading up with Al, who's very cheap. So I know I'm going to be buying all the meals, and if I want anything approaching like, you know, decent food in the fridge, it's not going to be Al who buys it. But you accept your friends for what they are, and we're going to head up there, run this and that LSC through. If they don't do well, I'm not going to sell them. I'm under no pressure. You know, there's another auction coming up in March, and I'll just run it there instead. But either way, I'm going to try to make the thing go away. So look, with all that said, let's just dive into this thing. So it's a 1979, again, Pontiac Firebird in the Formula trim. Very European-sounding trim package. Basically, it meant that it was the cheaper and the lighter way to get into the performance equipment list of the Trans Am. It had dual hood scoops. You can see those in the hood instead of that shaker the Trans Am had. No air extractors in the fenders. Throw up a picture, you can see the difference. And no aerodynamic lower spoilers. Even the rear spoiler was optional on Formulas. So basically, it was an Esprit trim package with the Trans Am drivetrain, and that made it appealing to, you know, not just guys looking for the lightest possible car for the most performance, but also the cheap guys who wanted to get into a Trans Am without having to pay for it, and, you know, probably that would have been me. Basically, look, Trans Ams and Formulas were as speedy as any American car you could buy in 1979. You know, speedier than that even. And in certain trims, it was considered by many to still be a true muscle car. You know, you could get the 400 4-speed in this thing with a pretty good horsepower ratio long after that kind of power and torque had disappeared from virtually every other American car. So Pontiac kept it alive. They really did, all the way through, up until probably 1980, you know, with the end of the 400 engine. Then it suffered for a few years before that 5.0 came out. But Pontiac kept it going, and it was considered a fairly real muscle car. You know, not this one. It doesn't have the right engine package, but you could get it. You could get the 400 4-speed WS6 package for handling. You know, it was the real deal. And if you look at 1979, that's a pretty damn good accomplishment, considering it was smack dab in the middle of the malaise era. I mean, if you look at the year, it was not a very good year for American performance cars, if anywhere, honestly. And it wasn't a very good year for people in general. The inflation rate was over 11%. You know, eggs cost a lot. We haven't seen that in a while. Gas prices were through the roof. Insurance prices were high. Our president was suggesting that Americans try to live less lavish lifestyles, like, you know, not getting too used to using their heat in the winter or having private transportation. You know, the famous malaise speech where the name came from Carter. This was not an optimistic time. There was an accident at 3 Mile Island nuclear plant in Pennsylvania that freaked people out and kind of proved to be a boon for the coal industry. The Soviets invaded Afghanistan, kind of the beginning of the end for them, and put us in bed with the Mujahideen and Osama bin Laden, which of course didn't work very well. The U.S., we established full sexual relations with China after many, many years. We threw Taiwan under the bus, despite all the great clock radios they'd given us. They were just gone. They were yesterday's news, and China was in. Saddam Hussein would come to power in Iraq. We know how that went. In Iran, the Ayatollah Khomeini, very sharp dresser. He turned the country into an Islamic state and took 63 American hostages for good measure. You know, they even tried to make a rescue. This is, people were celebrating Carter. They don't remember this stuff. There was this botched rescue attempt that ended up in absolute failure in a couple of wrecked helicopters. So it just didn't work out that well for President Carter at all. In Uganda, Idi Amin was finally deposed. Wasn't really a guy you'd like to call your friend. Elsewhere in Africa, the Somalians and Ethiopians started kicking the shit out of each other. Skylab, if you remember that was a big thing in my youth. I was a kid and I was looking up, afraid to die. That had an unplanned descent and, came crashing back to Earth, so that wasn't a good time. It was a good time for serial killers, though. You had some pretty good guys out there. You had Donald Harvey. You had a young and aspiring Jeffrey Dahmer and Robert Lee Yates. They were all kind of busy doing their serial killer thing, so at least we had that going for us. In movies, you had Alien, you had the Amityville Horror, you had Star Trek, Moonraker, everyone's feel-good movie of the year, The Deer Hunter, came out. On TV, you had Happy Days, you had Dallas, Mork and Mindy, Charlie's Angels, Chips, my favorite. It's like a car show watching that now. And, of course, Different Strokes. And speaking of Different Strokes, like Marcia Brady, that hot chick in the show turned out to, well, she ended up living a life of sin and crime after it all came to an end. In '91, her name was Dana Plato. She entered a Las Vegas video store, produced a pellet gun, and held the place up. She demanded the money from the register. She left with the money. The clerk called 911 and said, "Look, I've just been robbed by the girl who played Kimberly on Different Strokes." This is a true story. And then she came back 15 minutes later, apparently felt guilty, was immediately arrested, and she had stolen $164. Wayne Newton, obviously sensing an opportunity, posted her bail. 13 grand, and she was given 5 years probation. And she lived in a Winnebago after that for a few years, made some really lewd movies, and then finally died of an overdose or suicide, depending on who you believe, just a day after being exploited by Howard Stern on his show in '99. So kind of sad stuff for old Dana Plato. Kind of a tragic American story. In music, there was Michael Jackson coming to his own. You had Pink Floyd, you had the Police, the Bee Gees, Blondie, the Village People, Donna Summer, and Rod Stewart, who I've always just detested. So there it is. I mean, that was 1979. Pretty good year for music, pretty good year for movies, pretty crap year for everything else. And in the midst of that, this car was released. So very, very interesting. And, second-gen F-bodies were a frequent star of TV in the movies. Obviously, the most famous being Smokey and the Bandit from '77. But other stuff from the top of my head, and I know there are more, but these are just from the top of my head. You've got that Trans Am from McHugh with John Wayne, which I loved, absolutely loved. You had Thunderbolt and Lightfoot. There was an old Trans Am in that. The Z28 and Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Very, very cool. And then even the Highlander, which apparently was shit, there was actually a bizarre... I've seen this a couple of times. A Formula hood with a shaker in the middle of it. They had that running around. Then it was just a Formula hood. Then it was just a shaker. So they obviously had a few different cars and none of them matched. Also on Chips, you had Ponch driving a Trans Am, which intermittently also had a Formula hood. So second-gen F-bodies were definitely around. With that done, I'm going to get into the car, but I got to pause for a minute because I am just dripping and I can't see anything through my glasses and I'm friggin' miserable. So let me cool off, wipe down, and then we're going to keep going. Bear with me one moment. All right, so let's dive back into this thing. Ed Welburn, then vice president of GM Global Design, during the whole 60s, 70s era. He said that the first generation Camaro Firebird should not have been a design success, as it was based on an existing architecture, basically the Nova, the F-body platform. Well, it wasn't called, whatever. It was just based on cars that they had hanging around. And it was hurried to market, quickly designed, and made to address the personal coupe revolution that was occurring with baby boomer customers. And by personal coupe revolution, he means the Mustang. It was selling like crazy. It came out in '64. and a half. And GM was caught flat-footed and really needing an answer. And Pontiac, they also got the Firebird. You know, Chevy got the Camaro. But it was a consolation prize, the Firebird, to John Z. DeLorean, kind of a famous guy. He was then head of Pontiac, and he had revamped that company. And he badly wanted to make a rival for the Corvette called the Banshee. But, you know, GM wanted to keep the Corvette safe and exclusive, so they didn't do it. So they gave John Z the F-body platform as kind of a consolation prize. He would go on to make his own famous sports car. You know, I read the other day that if, what the hell was it? That if Back to the Future, the movie, of course, with his DeLorean, were made today, Michael J. Fox would be going back to the year, oh my God, to the year 1995, which is just a little bit disturbing. There's Cujo again with the drool. There he is. And I know he's going to see that the gate's open. He's going to make a break for it, so I'm going to have to keep an eye on him. I have no food. I promise you should head the other direction. There is nothing over here. Nothing. Nothing but, oh, God. Unbelievable. Thank you, Peter. All right, look, anyway, let's get back into the car. Go on. Go on now. Go on. Go home. Don't you bark either. Go home. Go back. There's food back there, probably. Go on now. Anyway. So there you have it. The Mustang was out. You know, Chevy and GM needed to answer it. They came out with the Camaro. And the first gen F-bodies were meant to be something of a placeholder until the more modern and thoroughly engineered second gen, like this one, could be finished. You know, but for a placeholder, the first gen became something of a legend. And now is considered one of the most beautiful and successful designs of, you know, certainly that decade, if not all time. So not a bad move for, you know, guys who hurried it together. The second gen was going to be more thought out. They were going to take their time. The body was lengthened. The Coke bottle curves of the first gave way to something a bit more swoopy, inspired by Europe, but still distinctly American. Oh, wonderful. I get phone calls coming in. I got dogs and phone calls, and all we need now is a helicopter and maybe some rabbits. Where the hell was I? So anyway, look, it became a bit more swoopy. It was inspired by the European designs, but was distinctly American. The designers borrowed from 1960s Ferraris, namely the 250 250 GT and GTO to some extent, the short wheelbase Berlinetta and the 250 GT Berlinetta Lusso. It's not a coincidence that this car is named the Formula, you know, as per Formula One, although Formula is a common term in American and European racing. But when you think Formula, as you see it's emblazoned down the side there, you tend to more think of, you know, that Ponzi racing where, you know, they spend more on catered breakfast than most NASCAR teams spend in a year. But anyway, they put the thing together, and did I mention that they called one of these a Berlinetta? Doesn't matter. They were pretty rich influences, the Ferraris, and the results would be pretty damn impressive to me. I mean, for a much less expensive vehicle, I think the design just knocked it out of the park and really stands as a testament to how talented those GM engineers of the time were, given what they had to work with, that they could create a design that frankly was ahead of its time. And it really was, because it wasn't immediately as beloved as the first gen. It did not sell as well when it came out. You know, I don't know if people didn't find it as appealing, if it looked too modern, if, you know, what the issue was. But it wasn't a great seller off the bat. And they even kind of thought they were going to kill it for a little while. And then, in 1977, a movie called Smokey and the Bandit came out. And that was it. I mean, sales just went through the roof in 77, 78, 79. Trans Ams sold like crazy. Formulas, it spread over to Z28s. They were outselling the Mustangs. It became one of the hottest cars of the decade, and that would continue. That would kind of seal their place in pop culture, and all through the 80s and 90s the cars would be pretty popular, not just with the mullet set, okay? A lot of people ended up driving these things, and I was an idiot kid at the time. I remember getting my own one, the 79 Formula in 1985. I was 15. I was 6 months away from my license. A friend of my sister's boyfriend's brother had restored one that, some town drunk had hit every guardrail in town. So he bought it, fixed it, and painted it. It seemed like a good deal. And my parents, God rest their souls, who were stupid enough to put, a big V8 performance car in the hands of a dumb kid. Well, they did it. And the problem was, so 15, 6 months, the thing had to sit in the garage while I drove the big yellow limo to school, the school bus. And it was devastating. Unlike snowflakes of today, I was desperate to get my license so I could start driving to school, and I finally did. And it's a genuine and absolute miracle that I lived through having that car, that it survived. And it makes me sad to think my parents were insane enough to put it in my hands. But of course it was the 80s. We were raised on hose water and neglect, so that was just the way it went at the time. But I was an idiot. I'm a miracle I didn't die. And quite frankly, if I could go through it all again, I would do it in a minute. I would absolutely love to do it again. But look at the styling of the car. So you've got the 4 square lights up front. That held true since, I want to say 1977. Although they closed the grille. It was more open in 77, 78. In the first Smokey and the Bandit movies, you see that. In the second one, it became this front end. They used those dual non-functional. I cut these out on my car when I was a kid, which made the engine filthy all the time. I probably shouldn't have done that, but they used those scoops in the hood instead of that shaker hood on the Trans Am. And the shaker's pretty damn cool, but I also did like the scoops. The Trans Am's also had big air extractors here on the side, which the Formulas did not have. Again, this was about saving money. Most of them probably came with Rally 2 wheels. When I bought this car, it had some horrible 20-inch wheels on it that just were awful. And I ended up trading them to Al for these 17-inch snowflakes that I had sold. Love that. My nephew perked up. These snowflake wheels, they're reproductions of the original alloys that are a little bit bigger. But I had bought these for, that is a long story I won't get into, and it's a devastating, horrible story. The moral of that story is never spend a bunch of money on car before you open up the trunk and find out that you can see your shoes through the bottom of the trunk. But anyway, you see those snowflake wheels. I think they look great. This was the era of graphics and decals, and you can see that enormous Formula logo there on the bottom of the door. Runs the whole length of the door. Frameless glass. You've got a trimmed window, which looks nice in the chrome. Probably this originally had chrome trim around the front and rear window, but it was given a paint job. It's a very nice original car with one paint job, and I think they put black trim on it for the hell of it. But you can see it's nice. You see that it was a square window early, which became more of a curved window later in the second gen. But the way that it runs from the roof all the way back in a swoop to that rear spoiler, and that became a design feature of F-bodies all the way through the very end. Even when they killed Pontiac, which was devastating. Love these smoke tail lamps, which run the entire length of the back. Very, very cool. You've got a little gas door in the middle, which is very fragile. I had to replace that on mine a few times. It just wears out. And it's very hard to change the damn lights, by the way. But I think it looks great. The urethane integrated bumpers look good on the car. GM had finally learned how to fix the 5-mile-an-hour bumper issue. Love the quad tips with the 2 pipes coming down under the back quarter panels. Very classic Trans Am look. suspect that was also added to this car. I think that was more of a Trans Am thing, and the formulas would have had twice pipes just coming out the back. You got the chrome door handles, you got sport mirrors, you've got, you know, look, man, it's just a good looking car, and you can see why I want to hang on to this thing, but I just can't. It's going to be destroyed if I do. In the front, you've got couple of air inlets there on either side of the license plate with some buried parking lamps, and you know, there's your arrowhead coming down the center, and I don't know, this is just making me very nostalgic, and I'm gonna be sad to see it go. Anyway, look, I'm gonna pause there. Actually, let me get inside the trunk for 1 minute, because I'm gonna put all my crap in there, so you may as well see it before I do. I think I left the keys in the ignition. May as well do under the hood too, and then we'll get to that point. I'm getting ahead of myself. So under there's a key. There's no interior release, so you have to do that. This was a Canadian car, so you can see all that undercoating. Drives me crazy. If I were keeping this thing for sure, I'd probably have all that removed. And there's that inflatable space. Look at that thing. How comfortable would you feel bolting that on your car on the side of the interstate with that little inflator tube? Yeah, I feel real good about that. But, you know, look, a decent-sized trunk, even if it has a very small access, you're not going to fit a teenager in there unless you really shove them. But, you know, little kids, yeah, you're going to be able to stuff them in there. They're going to be okay. And you do have some carpet to keep them nice and safe. But there you go. One thing I found out, by the way, was that if you kept a bunch of shit in your trunk, which I did as a kid, and it moved around, it would end up banging the quarter panels and put Audi dents in them. So a lot of lessons learned the hard way when I had this car. Love that formula script on the back of the spoiler too. Let's have a look under the hood. So I did one of these for Uncle John. Oh, this is, hang on, this is a double pull. This is hard. Oh, God. All right, so I did one of these for Uncle Johnny before, one of his cars, which was the exact opposite because it was, you know, the ultimate in performance. It had that, I think it was called the W72 or W57 package on a Formula, where it had all the WS6 stuff from the Trans Am, which meant four-wheel discs, Pontiac 400 with a 4-speed, you know, killer car. This one, not so well equipped, being a Canadian model, and of course the Canadians are as cheap as Alice, so this has the 301, the 4.9 liter, very uncommon in 1979. In the U.S. I would say most of these cars came with the one my original Firebird did, which was the 403 Oldsmobile engine and the automatic. That was probably it. Identifiable because on the Shaker hood scoops, it would have said 6.6 liter, while the 400 Pontiac would say TA 6.6. So anyway, you get what you get. So I ended up with this one, which is a 4.9, which is, you know, adequate, and it's good enough for me because honestly, in this era, you know, it's hard to beat a Toyota Camry with 300 horsepower. So unless you make things very expensive and racy, you're just not going fast. All these old hot rods from the 70s or 80s are more or less just cruisers now, unless you want to spend a fortune. You know, this would be a great candidate for some kind of LS swap from a Corvette. You know, you could jam it in there, have your 500 horsepower and make a hell of a car out of it, but I think it's fine with this. It, you know, it does what it needs to. I'd like it to have air conditioning, wish it did, but, you know, that's just me. Johnny, for instance, when he buys a car, he much prefers they don't have it. I don't understand that, but that's the way he thinks. Again, I was going to keep this, and I was, so I pondered it. They do make a vintage air kit for a couple of grand that you could put in, and Robert the German said it's not so tough, he couldn't do it, so I probably would have done that. If it sells, then I'm not. Obviously, if I have to take it back, if I have to keep it because I can't don't get what I need for it, then maybe I'll just put the air in it. We'll see. But either way, those were the 3 engine choices. You could get, again, rear disc brakes. They had the WS6 package. Very famous F-body guy, Herb Adams, designed the suspension for it, radial tune suspension. And it was very, proper. It held the road well. It was beloved by the car magazines and was considered to be a pretty good handling car. And of course, you could get the automatic or the 4-speed. So I am going to pause it there and put all my crap in the trunk, and then we're going to go for a spin. All right, so let's have a look inside this thing. And I just love that back glass. Love the little blue Firebird. Interesting color combo on this, and silver, which is a nice conservative color. But then it becomes very unconservative with all the decals and Firebirds and stripes and that sort of thing. But yeah, I do like it. I like the color combo in this car a lot. Inside, you see it's got a couple of high back bucket seats, which of course was the style at the time. Nice little sporty steering wheel with the lightning holes in it, and Firebird and the horn pad. Obviously not the best materials, the best quality, the best attachments. Mine kind of disintegrated, and this one is a nice original car, so it's held up very well, but, it was kind of rough in terms of build quality from the day it left the factory. Let me put my little floor mat down here. You see nice. There's original carpet in this car, which, I think is pretty miraculous. If you look in the back, your Canadians are going to be... Yeah, they're going to be pretty friggin' miserable back there. I mean, it's tight. The headroom is shit. You do have a couple places to hang your dry cleaning from, which is fine. But, I will say this, though. Many relationships were, consummated in the back of a second-gen F-body, on the way to a Loverboy concert, with plenty of weed and beer going around. So there was enough room for trysts. That was, but otherwise pretty Spartan. They don't even give you an ashtray back there, so you're ashing out the window and probably burning the hair of whoever's sitting in the front seat. So, yeah, back seats are kind of rough in this car. I'll hop in. All right, and look, being a Formula, again, the equipment is going to be a little Spartan. Trans Ams, for the most part, they're going to have power windows, power locks, T-tops, that sort of thing. This, you could get all that on these, but most people didn't. Again, it was about either saving money or about, keeping the car light so it would be quicker. And I think most people, it was just about saving money. Here you see that signature dash trim, the turned aluminum, the fish scale, whatever you want to call it. I think looks great, Trans Am style with the gauges. That was one of the great joys of my youth, was getting in this car every morning and seeing that dash face facing me. I did not have a tack, I had a clock, and I see the tack isn't working in this thing. It's just stuck at 3,500, so maybe it's for the best anyway. You got your headlights here, your wipers, little radial tune suspension badge. You got your water temp and oil pressure in the middle. This, again, a Canadian car, and has dual citizenship, by the way. It still has a valid Canadian title as well as a valid Florida title, so probably a good car for a Canadian to buy. You see just 46,000 kilometers on the clock. The guy I bought it from swears to me that might be accurate. I don't know. Either way, it's definitely not been put through the ringer, this car, because they don't hold up well to high mileage. There you see the HVAC controls. Again, no AC in this one, so a very simple control. You got your fuel and volts. You got a fantastic 70s lighter right here with a picture of a burning cigarette on it, just to be sure. You got a Firebird logo, weird little afterthought defrost area. You got a GM Delco digital cassette deck, which is fantastic. This guy added a couple speakers there in the center console. These aren't supposed to be there. I'm not in love with them, but I guess I'd rather he did that on these than cut into the door panels, which are more expensive. So at least those are virgin. You even see the wear from some twat using her foot to open the door over the years. And yeah, what are you going to do? You got a little glove box here. Nice. There's the wheel lock, which I hate. Still has all the original books with the original dealer jacket. That's kind of cool. This is the build sheet that you can find when you pull out the back seats. It'll basically the manufacturer's window sticker that gives all the codes for what it has and what it came with, and it's neat to see that with the car, along with a bunch of other documents. The original key cut tabs, which are cool. You could just tell this thing was pretty well maintained and well preserved. It still even has the original dealers. They bought it new as family, and there's the original keys and tag that it came with. So nice documentation on this one. Here in the console you see the automatic. I replaced that with the B&M Mega Shifter when I was a kid, because that's just the kind of kid I was. But you know, it looks good, it's fine, it works. A little trimmed area to put cigarettes and guns and whatever else, and you got a great big oh shit bar there. I've got my trucker ashtray here in the center console. These are fantastic. You just hang them up here, and you're sporting. Otherwise a good place to put crap, and God knows I did put a lot of crap in there when I was a kid. We got some marine fuses, and it still latches and still opens. So again, a testament to this car being pretty nicely looked after. You know, no mirrors, cocaine mirrors, because again, this was the cheaper version. Odd little police style dome light, and the way the door locks work and the windows, I could break into this car in like 12 seconds. But anyway, let's just go for a spin. So fire it up. And, you know, the 301 does a decent job of sounding menacing. Is it the tech's trying to do something? Have Robert the German look at that. Maybe it's just not connected to the distributor very well. Anyway, I'm used to seeing that gas gauge on empty. It's on a quarter tank now, which was about the most that I ever saw when I was a kid, even though gas was cheap. And when you'd hammer it, that needle would go down to E and scare you before creeping back up again, but not all the way to where it was. These things get such terrible gas mileage. No tilt on this, but the horn works fine, and yeah, everything as it should be. So I believe we're gonna have a Turbo Hydra 350 in this, which is a fine transmission. You put a shift kit in it, you can chirp second gear, and all will be well. So hopefully the black dog didn't escape while I was looking the other way. I got to close Peter's gate now, so I'll keep an eye out for him. Hold on 1 second. All right, gate is closed. Hopefully the dog didn't escape and went off to die somewhere. That'd be just great if I killed Peter's girlfriend's dog. I could, you know, imagine I'll hear the end of that. I've stuck a Bluetooth thing here in the lighter with the stereo, because if I'm going to be driving a 79 Formula, then I really do have to, relive my youth the whole way, so. You know, I'm going to turn that down so I don't get copyrighted. But driving the 79 Firebird and listening to Van Halen is, you know, as close to Nirvana as I'm probably going to get. I mean, you can see that 301 has a little bit of pep to it. It's not pathetic. It certainly is good enough as a Boulevard cruiser now. You know, it's got a 4-barrel. It gives you the little bit of suck down noise. You could flip the cap on the air cleaner if you wanted to get more of a howl from it. And you know, everything's good in the world. That Vista, again, the one I grew up with, the 2 hood scoops, the feel of the steering wheel, kind of over-assisted power steering, but fine. The handling of the car is actually really good, you know, certainly for the era. I found that when I was getting on the interstate on-ramp this morning, probably 10 or 15 kilometers an hour too fast. The metric system. But it held its own, and it was better than I remembered. This is probably a lot less worn out than mine was, so I could see why people enjoyed it, you know. It definitely had, oh, there I was in second. It definitely had, you know, some road holding ability, along with the available big V8s and such, which made it a great performance car. of the era. You know, way better than pretty much any other American. Even the Corvette was pretty crap in '79. You know, I'm sure it held its own against this thing, but the fact that this thing held its own against the Corvette tells you something. So, what a joy to drive. You have a long, expansive hood. You're sitting really leaned back in the chair in kind of a unique style. You don't sit upright like you do in the Mustang, which is, of course, its #1 competitor. Much more of a racy feel behind the wheel of this thing. And, you know, it's lovely. You just lean back, you know, spin the wheel with your pinky and watch the world go by. And reliving my youth this way has been an absolute joy. Test our speedo, we're running a little high. It's been an absolute joy, and that's why I initially sort of planned to hang on to it, and I'm kind of sad that I'm not. So again, it'll be in that Lakeland winter sale here in a couple days, and if it does what it needs to, it'll hopefully go to a nice new owner who looks after it and loves it as much as I do. Otherwise, you know, we're going to keep pumping along. I got that Tornado coming. I've got that Lexus MS430 coming. Bunch more cars to get through, and a bunch more cars running through that March sale at Premier Auction. So we'll keep the ball rolling. I'm going to go spend a cheap weekend in Lakeland, you know, with Al pinching his pennies. I think my nephew's going to come and visit. Maybe I'll try to do a little video from the auction, although I never do, but I'll try. And otherwise, thanks very much for having a look. Appreciate it. And we will see you with the next one. Take care.